The laws of the apocalypse have descended. Every soul on earth is strictly forbidden from using the word no, or any phrase that carries a negative or denying connotation. The moment you utter a rejection, you will drop dead on the spot. And my scumbag neighbor used this absolute rule of affirmation as a weapon to plunder every last scrap of food I had stockpiled. Lenbai, I've run out of water over here. Hand over half of your supply, will you? Lenbai, I'm starving and my pantry is empty. Give me all the food you have left, okay? After he had stripped me of every single ration, he reached out and violently grabbed me by the hair. Zhang Hao crouched down, maintaining his painful grip. The last pack of cookies from your stash tasted pretty damn good. He let out a boisterous mocking laugh, deliberately exaggerating the sound of his chewing. I glared at him with pure unadulterated hatred, yet I was utterly powerless to resist. Ultimately, I perished in an endless cycle of hunger and humiliation. But then my eyes snapped open once more. I've regressed to the day before the apocalypse began. I can hear Zhang Hao's wife, Lin Shui, next door, her voice dripping with sweet forced affection. Darling, will you cherish and treat me well forever? A cold smirk spread across my face. This time, the roles of predator and prey are about to flip. I won't just make him vomit up the supplies he stole. With heavy interest added on top, I'll make him personally hand over his precious wife, his child, and every single thing he values until he has nothing left. In this world where you cannot say no, any simple question can be transformed into a lethal blade to strip you of everything. In my previous life, I lived like a pathetic stray dog passively awaiting my execution. I failed to grasp the true mechanics of these rules instantly. The Forbidden No decree seems to grant the questioner absolute infinite power, but its true core lies within the realm of logic. As long as your inquiry is sufficiently ingenious, you can trap your opponent in an inescapable paradox. And as a top-tier law student, manipulating logic and setting linguistic traps is my specialty. I climbed out of bed with a newfound purpose. I've confirmed the date. It is indeed the final day before the world falls into ruin. Next, I checked my bank account balance. $200,000, my war chest is ready. This was the nest egg my parents left for my graduate studies. In my past life, this money became nothing more than a string of worthless digits as the world collapsed. But now, it serves as the primary fulcrum for my lever of revenge. I immediately grabbed my phone, launched the app for the city's largest supermarket chain, and began a frantic shopping spree flooding my cart. Every essential I could envision was added to the manifest. 20 minutes later, a $200,000 order was finalized. Finally, I typed a single calculated line into the notes. Are you willing to accept my order? I tapped send. I tapped send. The order confirmation page instantly flashed on the screen. It's done. I stared out at the deceptively peaceful world, my lips curling into a frigid, predatory smirk. Zhang Hao, the game has officially commenced. Are you prepared to play? By 9 a.m. the following morning, a cold mechanical broadcast resonated within the minds of all 7 billion people on Earth. The decree has been issued. From this moment forward, between all intelligent life forms, the word no is strictly prohibited, along with any vocabulary expressing a negative intent. We wish you all an enjoyable game. The world fell into a momentary deathly silence, before erupting into a tidal wave of screams and total anarchy. Standing by the window, I watched the chaos unfold below. Right then, a panicked man shrieked at another individual approaching him. Don't come any closer. In the next heartbeat, he was erased by an invisible force, reduced to nothing but a pile of ash. Terror-stricken shrieks shattered the air instantly. I simply pulled the curtain shut with total indifference, muffling the agonized wails of the outside world. Suddenly, my smartphone vibrated. It was the supermarket manager calling. His voice was trembling on the verge of a breakdown. He stuttered, asking if I was the one who placed the order, and why the remarks I left were so bizarre. I gave him a calm, measured response. Are you willing to follow the order and deliver every single item to my door? Silence hung on the line for what felt like an hour. Eventually, a massive freight truck pulled up below. Several deathly pale delivery workers appeared, and under a friendly negotiation with the manager, they began hauling the supplies into my sanctuary. My rented apartment is on the 3rd floor, and the building lacks an elevator. My massive hall soon clogged the entire hallway. Neighbors peered through their peepholes with eyes full of dread and unmistakable greed. Yet not a single soul dared to step outside. Once the final crate was successfully brought up, the delivery workers, on the verge of physical collapse, stared at me with trembling lips. Sir, are we permitted to leave now? I simply offered a subtle smirk, kicking a few bottles of water and loaves of bread toward them. Of course. Are you willing to depart this instant? They reacted as if granted a divine pardon, scrambling away and practically falling over themselves. I slammed the door shut, leaning against the mountain of supplies, finally feeling a wave of genuine exhaustion wash over me. But this is merely the prologue. I cracked open a brand new toolkit and began the grueling task of fortifying my bunker. In my previous life, My soft heart led me to answer a neighbor's plea for help, exposing the fact that I was sitting on a goldmine of supplies. Those pathetic cries for mercy only lured in that hungry wolf Zhang Hao. In this life, I demand nothing but absolute silence. I spent the entire afternoon hermetically sealing every crack in the doors and windows, before reinforcing my bedroom door with 3 heavy-duty locks. When the work was done, I slumped onto the sofa. There were still a few crates of water left in the hall that I hadn't managed to bring inside yet. I caught my breath, rising to finish the final stage of my preparations. Just as I was dragging the last case of mineral water, the door opposite mine creaked open with a haunting groan. Zhang Hao poked his head out, wearing a perfectly curated, gentle smile that screamed kind neighbor. But as his gaze swept across the hallway, landing on the uncollected supplies I hadn't yet secured, I vividly captured the moment. A flicker of predatory brilliance ignited in his pupils. It was the exact same look he had when he cornered me in my past life. He locked eyes with me, feigning shock as he muttered, "Xiao Bai, are you moving out or something?" He spoke with a slow, casual drawl while leisurely stepping out into the hall. His gaze remained glued to the crates of mineral water beside me, flickering like the tongue of a venomous serpent. I offered him no response, simply watching his pathetic performance in silence. In my past life, it was this exact mask of hypocrisy that caused me to lower my guard. Playing the role of a reliable older brother, he showered me with fake concern, until he had systematically extracted every bit of my info, finally baring his fangs when I was at my most desperate. The silence didn't even make him flinch. He just chuckled, pointing a finger at the water at my feet. I stared intensely at that trembling finger, nearly losing control of the overwhelming urge to cave his skull in with the wrench in my hand. I must remain composed. The time hasn't come just yet. The prey has already wandered into the trap I've laid. All I need to do now is guide him step by agonizing step, until he willingly stands right in the center of the iron jaws. He still believes he's the hunter in total control, convinced that I'm still that same brainless victim he can easily manipulate at will. He's trying to test me with a basic leading question, probing to see if I truly grasp the new world's rules, and testing the boundaries of my resolve. He wants to crack my door open with the least effort possible, and strip me of my resources. Fine, I'll let you ask. But every single syllable you utter will become the very noose that hangs you. Zhang Hao finally ended his little one-man show. He leaned in close, thrusting his face right into my personal space, and in a tone he clearly thought was endearing, he spoke with a smirk. "Hey, Xiaobai, it's a real scorcher today. Would you be willing to share half your water with me?" There it is. The question hit like a stone dropped into a stagnant pond, sending ripples outward. They echoed through the sweltering hallway in waves. The air itself seemed to solidify. I could practically see the individual, specks of dust dancing in the fading twilight. The grin on Zhang Hao's face remained frozen in that perfectly calculated curve, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of certain victory. He's absolutely certain that I can't refuse him. After all, the decree treats every soul with brutal impartiality. In my previous life, when faced with this exact interrogation, I completely lost my composure. I stammered and faltered, having no idea how to retaliate. Ultimately, under the crushing invisible weight of the rules, my silence was taken as a lethal consent. That case of water became the first step he took into my home, and my first step toward a bottomless abyss. But now, staring at that fraudulent face, my heartbeat remains eerily steady. He thinks his phrasing is clever. "Can you share half with me?" It's a textbook example of a strategically ambiguous question. Multiple traps are meticulously hidden within those words. He's exploiting our history as neighbors to camouflage a blatant robbery as sharing. He's weaponizing the absolute authority of the decree, knowing I am physically incapable of uttering the word no if I submit and agree. He successfully probes the boundaries of the rules and my own. Weakness all at zero cost to himself. And if I descend into a panic and start haggling with him, it only confirms his suspicion that I'm a brainless puppet, ripe for his easy manipulation. Cut the act. That cheap plastic smile of yours couldn't move anyone, except yourself. I locked eyes with him and suddenly let out a soft laugh. My smile was faint and airy, radiating a touch of innocent bewilderment. I didn't dignify his question with an answer. Instead, I tilted my head to the side, speaking with an incredibly naive tone. "Brother Zhang Hao, I didn't quite catch that. Are you asking?" I intentionally let the sentence hang, watching his pupils constrict slightly in response to my counter question, then enunciating every single syllable. I clearly translated the unspoken subtext hidden beneath his casual request. "Are you willing to take half the water I painstakingly bought and hauled up these stairs with my own sweat, and just hand it over to me for absolutely nothing?" "Is that exactly what you mean?" A deathly suffocating silence filled the hallway. I watched the grin on Zhang Hao's face fracture with a microscopic hint of rigidity. His gaze shifted instantly, darkening with a mix of scrutiny and wary surprise. He clearly never expected that the neighbor he viewed as an introverted, perhaps even slightly dim-witted kid next door, would actually pull a move like this on him. I had stripped his hidden agenda bare and laid it out shamelessly for all to see. Now, this was a question he couldn't possibly answer. The moment he admits to it, his persona as the kindly neighbor will instantly shatter. In the apocalypse, openly admitting you're a parasite looking for a handout makes you an immediate target for everyone's hostility. Yet he is equally forbidden from saying no, because one syllable of rejection means instant death. In the hallway, the doors of several neighbors creaked open just a crack. Countless ears and eyes were pressed against the wood, intently watching this first clash. Under the new world's absolute decree, I could feel those gazes oscillating between me and Zhang Hao. Upon Zhang Hao's brow, tiny beads of cold sweat began to form. His Adam's apple bobbed nervously. His selfish, calculating brain was clearly redlining at high speed, desperately hunting for a way to break this deadlock. Unfortunately for him, I wasn't about to grant him that chance. Just as he prepared to speak, hoping to use some verbal gymnastics to dodge the topic, I let out another smirk. This time my grin widened, bordering on a mocking, predatory taunt. I gave him absolutely no room to breathe, before hurling my second question like a jagged spear. Or perhaps, I drawled, intentionally elongating the sound, as my gaze drifted past his shoulder, to the door behind him, which was already slightly ajar. What you're really asking is, are you willing to trade your beautiful wife, Lin Shui, in exchange for this half case of mineral water? Zhang Hao's mind detonated with a deafening roar. The string of his so-called rationality snapped instantly. His face flashed from a paralyzed deathly pale to a deep suffocating crimson, before finally turning a sickly shade of ashen gray. He glared at me with pure unadulterated hatred, the greed and calculation in his eyes, completely eclipsed by shock and explosive rage. He looked as if he wanted to lung forward and tear me to shreds. And that sentence of mine acted like a massive depth charge. Behind the various doors in the hallway, audible gasps of shock erupted simultaneously. The thrill of such scandalous drama clearly eclipsed the sheer terror of the apocalypse. Then, the most fatal moment occurred. The door standing right behind Zhang Hao creaked open, swinging wide. Lin Xue's elegant and delicate face was a mask of utter bewilderment and unease. She had obviously overheard the heated argument and stepped out to investigate the situation, only to be blindsided as my poisonous calculated words pierced through her ears. Time seemed to grind to a halt. I watched as the color drained from her face until it was white as a sheet, and then her gaze snapped from my smirking face to her husband, Zhang Hao. She was desperately waiting for an answer, for a single explanation. Zhang Hao, however, was trapped by my hellish question, nailed firmly to a pillar of absolute shame. He was cornered under the prying eyes of every neighbor, and right in front of his precious wife. He couldn't confirm the first question, as that would lead to total social suicide. He definitely couldn't confirm the second, unless he wanted his family life to implode instantly. Yet he was physically barred from saying no. The heavy atmosphere was saturated with the pure ecstasy of a public execution. I crossed my arms, watching him with leisurely amusement. Brother Zhang Hao, which question were you trying to ask me exactly? Just pick one so I can give you a proper answer. Well, finally, with a face devoid of all blood, Zhang Hao grabbed Lin Shui and ignored my interrogation. Retreating into their room at high speed, I simply hoisted my last crate of water and returned home with a triumphant swagger. In the dead of night, a knock resonated against my front door. The sound was faint and timid, carrying a sense of hesitation and stealth, as if afraid of alerting anyone else, yet tinged with an irrepressible sense of despair. I walked over to the door and peered through the peephole. The voice-activated lights in the hall remained dark. It was pitch black out there, save for the sliver of weak moonlight filtering through the window. Despite the shadows, I could clearly discern that pale, tear-stained face outside my door. It was Lin Shui, Zhang Hao's wife. She was cradling a frail, tiny child in her arms. The infant was fast asleep, its little face withered and pinched, as if in the throes of agonizing discomfort. She appeared far more haggard than she had during the day, her lips parched and cracked, her eyes hollow and vacant, like a delicate flower pulverized by a relentless storm. I didn't unlock the door, nor did I utter a single sound. I simply stood there, silently observing her, watching her shiver in the oppressive darkness, trembling from pure terror and helplessness. Finally, as if her last ounce of strength had evaporated, she leaned her forehead against the frigid metal of the door, letting out a sob so suppressed it sounded like a strangled whimper. "I beg of you." Her voice was a fragile thread, yet it struck like a hammer against the deathly silence of the corridor. Only then did I speak, my voice cold and detached through the door. "What you're trying to ask is, are you willing to give me some food? To save your dying child?" The woman outside shuddered violently, snapping her head up toward the peephole, as if she had finally grasped a life-saving straw, yet seemingly paralyzed by my brutal directness. She choked back a sob, nodding frantically. Yes, yes. My baby has a fever. Hasn't eaten in an entire day. Please, I didn't offer an immediate response. I was wondering, where was Zhang Hao? Where was the man who vowed he loved her? The one who swore to cherish her for a lifetime? Ah, that's right. He's likely currently losing his mind with rage. following that humiliating public execution earlier, venting all of his pathetic, impotent fury onto his own wife and defenseless child. A man who loses face in the outside world only knows how to take it out on his family at home. I witnessed that exact brand of drama far too often in my past life. I clicked the lock open, but only pulled the door back a mere sliver, keeping the heavy security chain firmly engaged. Through the narrow gap, I slid out a carton of milk and 2 individually wrapped small buns. Use these to line the child's stomach for now. Lin Chu's eyes ignited with instant hope. She scrambled to reach out and receive the offering. Those hands, once perfectly manicured and elegant, were now trembling with bone-white knuckles from the stress. But at the exact millisecond, her fingertips grazed the milk carton. I refused to let go. I lowered my voice to a lethal whisper, like a demonic murmur, slithering through the gap and into her ear. A man who prioritizes his own fragile ego over the survival of his wife and child. Do you really expect him to protect you? Her entire body paralyzed in an instant. Her hand jerked back from the milk carton, as if she had been seared by an open flame. I could vividly witness the light within her eyes rapidly flickering out and dying. In its place, there emerged something far darker, the hollow agony of a truth she could no longer deny. I released my grip, letting the rations fall into her arms. Then with a heavy thud, I slammed the door, locking her and her turbulent emotions out in the dark. I didn't spare her another glance, but I could hear her frantic, stumbling footsteps as she retreated to her own unit. Almost immediately, Zhang Hao's roar erupted from next door. You actually crawled to that bastard for food. You've dragged my dignity through the damn mud. Then came Lin Chui's stifled hysterical sobs, followed by the muffled thud of something heavy hitting the floor, leaning against the frigid metal of my door. A predatory sneer curved across my lips. Perfect. The first cracks have already appeared. But this is merely the appetizer. After about 10 minutes of silence, the domestic violence next door finally ceased. In its wake, the sound of Zhang Hao pacing the hallway echoed, along with his intentionally raised, fury-laden voice meant for everyone to hear. He began pounding on a neighbor's door. Brother Wang, you awake? Listen, I've got something to tell you. That guy across from me is a total piece of trash. He weaponized those insane rules to force my wife to her knees for him, all just for a single bite of food. You'd better watch your back around him, but that guy next door is a literal demon. He's using these rules to hijack all of our belongings and tear our families apart. Rumors are the cheapest, yet most lethal weapons during the apocalypse. They can effortlessly incite mass panic and dormant malice. Predictably, footsteps soon echoed outside my door once more. This wasn't just a solitary visitor. It was a chaotic cacophony of at least 5 different people. They converged at my entrance, like a pack of hounds catching the scent of fresh blood. I peered through the peephole. Zhang Hao stood at the forefront, his face twisted with a sick vengeful full sensation since Behind him stood several imposing large men, all residents of this very building. Some were gripping baseball bats, while others brandished heavy wrenches. The tension spiked to a breaking point. Outside, their breathing was heavy, ragged, and frantic, separated by nothing but a thin security door. Their greedy malice felt thick enough to solidify and drip onto the floor. Lan Bai opened this door. Zhang Hao's voice barked through the wood, carrying an undercurrent of repressed excitement and fake bravado. He had clearly learned his lesson from earlier today. Those 4 words were a direct command. Skillfully dodging every linguistic minefield the rules could trigger, I remained motionless behind the door, studying that distorted face through the lens. Behind him, Brother Wang was testing the weight of a heavy pipe in his palm. On the other side, though, Sister Li was empty-handed. Her eyes were locked onto my supplies stacked in the entryway, glowing with a hunger more terrifying than a starving wolf. These weren't neighbors anymore. They were a flock of vultures circling a fresh kill. I stayed silent, just watching them quietly. Lan Bai, we're all neighbors here. The world has gone to hell. We should be looking out for each other. Seeing that I wasn't biting, Zhang Hao softened his tone, attempting to use moral blackmail to pry my door open. You've hoarded so much stuff at Gi's. It's not like you can finish it all alone. Share some with the group, it thought. We'll all remember your incredible kindness. Exactly, little Land. Just open up. We only want to discuss things with you. Brother Wang chimed in while that heavy pipe in his hand subconsciously tapped against his palm. My lips curled into a freezing sneer. Discuss. You bring lethal weapons to a discussion. If this were my previous life, I might have tried to reason with them out of pure terror, or surrendered my supplies out of a soft heart. But in this life, this door is the absolute boundary between life and death, and the stage for my grand revenge. I cleared my throat, letting my steady voice pierce through the door panel, delivering every word clearly to each person's ears. Jang Hao, are you trying to let everyone know that you lured them here to be your sacrificial pawns, just so you could hoard all my supplies for yourself? Those words hit like a bucket of ice water, instantly chilling the feverish tension outside. A deathly silence followed. Jang Hao's expression froze with visible rigidity. He opened his mouth, his Adam's apple bobbing violently. He wanted to refute me, wanted to shout no or I didn't. But under the iron grip of the rules, those words are the scythe of the Grim Reaper. Say no, and he drops dead instantly. Say, I didn't, and he turns to ash in a heartbeat. He could only choke back his words, his face turning a suffocating shade of purple, as the veins in his temples throbbed wildly. The neighbors standing behind him shifted their gazes instantly. Once the seed of suspicion is planted, nourished by the panic of the apocalypse, it grows into a towering tree of paranoia. The pipe in Brother Wang's hand froze midair, his eyes darting suspiciously between me and Jang Hao. Don't listen to his lies. Jang Hao finally squeezed out a sentence, his voice turning shrill from the sheer pressure. He's just trying to sow discord among us. We just need to get inside, and then everything gets split equally. I let out a soft, airy chuckle, a sound drenched in mockery. Everyone, do you truly believe that a man who would use his own wife as a bargaining chip will actually share a single bite of food with you? The commotion outside reached a fever pitch. Sister Lee gasped, covering her mouth in shock, her eyes scanning Jang Hao from head to toe. It was the kind of look one reserves for literal trash. Lambai, shut your damn mouth. Jang Hao snapped, his face flushed with humiliated rage. He slammed his fist against the door. Everyone move in. Break it down. If anything happens, I'll take the heat. Oh, you'll take the heat. I abruptly disengaged the primary lock. The sharp metallic click echoed through the silent hallway like a thunderclap. The mob outside clearly didn't expect me to open up. They instinctively recoiled half a step. The door slowly creaked open, but only by a mere few inches. That sturdy security chain remained firmly locked, keeping my sanctuary separate from their world. I stood behind the narrow gap, revealing only a single cold eye, as I stared down this pathetic rabble. Well, who wants to be the first to die? With slow, deliberate movements, I pulled a utility knife from my pocket and slid the blade out with a raspy click. While such a small blade might seem utterly non-threatening to them in this new world of strict decrees, language is a true nuclear option. Brother Wang, right? E.T. I locked onto the most muscular man in the group. That pipe in your hand looks quite heavy if you use it to breach my home. Are you willing to risk a conviction of armed robbery and the instant death of your entire family? Wang's hand jerked violently, nearly dropping the heavy pipe onto his own toes. It was a flawless logical trap. While the rules only explicitly ban negative words, they also judge the core intent. If I define his actions as a robbery, and he is physically unable to deny it, because he cannot say no, then he has logically confessed to the crime of robbery by default. And under my calculated guidance, once he subconsciously accepts the weight of such a high-risk gamble, his primal fear of death will swell to an uncontrollable magnitude. I'm just, Brother Wang stammered, sweat pouring down his face like a torrential rain. He desperately wanted to clarify that he wasn't here to rob me, but the words were physically forbidden. With a single sentence, I had effectively barricaded all his exits. Well, is the silence your answer? My gaze remained as sharp as shards of ice, scanning the faces of every single person in the mob. Or perhaps, Sister Lee, are you willing to risk your life for a few bites promised by Jang Hao, leaving your own children behind, to become helpless orphans in this world? Sister Lee shuddered violently, the greed in her eyes instantly eclipsed by sheer terror. She recoiled several steps, as if she had been seared by a white-hot iron. Look at them, Jang Hao. I spoke through the gap, mocking the neighbor whose face was turning ashen. Not a single soul is willing to die for your cause. At this moment, Jang Hao was teetering on the edge of a mental breakdown. He assumed that, by rallying a mindless mob, he could force me to submit to his will, or at the very least smash my door down by force. But he had forgotten one crucial detail. In this world where you cannot say no, any moment that demands a defense or an explanation becomes a lethal, inescapable judgment. He was powerless to refute my accusations, and even more incapable of pacifying his recruits, without triggering the rules and dropping dead. Everyone, Jang Hao barked, making a final desperate stand. He spun around, turning his back to me, to face the agitated neighbors, his eyes burning with a savage intensity. Plundering his hoard is our only chance. It's the only way we survive. Do you all actually want to starve to death? Starve. I seized that specific word, ready to hurl my final deadly dagger. Jang Hao, since you're such a selfless leader, who can't bear to see everyone go hungry, then why don't you bring out those 2 cases of ham sausages and that large bag of rice hidden in your pantry to share with everyone first? This time the atmosphere solidified into lead. A dozen predatory gazes locked onto Jang Hao like searchlights, pinning him down with suffocating intensity. Those were the predatory gazes of famished beasts. Locking onto their next kill, Zhang Hao's pupils constricted violently in sheer terror. He did indeed have a secret stash hidden away. It was his final trump card for survival. He never imagined I'd know his secret, let alone expose his hypocrisy in front of the mob. You're talking nonsense. He instinctively tried to deny the accusation. But the phrase talking nonsense doesn't contain an absolute forbidden negative. He was dancing on the edge of death. Nonsense am I? I smirked, my expression radiating a brilliant malice. Then are you willing to lead everyone to your place for a quick look right now? If everyone checks your home and proves that I'm lying, sir, I will hand over everything in my unit with both hands. Are you willing? Checkmate for Zhang Hao. This was a lethal zero-sum ultimatum. Either he leads them home, exposing his hoard to be plundered by the neighbors, or he refuses. And while he can't explicitly say no, any silence or pathetic excuse would be a silent confession of his deception. It would prove he wanted the neighbors as cannon fodder, while he planned to feast in secret. No matter which path he chose, the authority and kind neighbor persona he worked so hard to build within this group was about to utterly implode. Sweat poured down Zhang Hao's brow and into his eyes, stinging him with a sharp burning sensation. But he didn't even dare to wipe it away. He watched as those eyes shifted from suspicion to rage, and finally into pure unadulterated hatred. His legs began to shake uncontrollably. Go take a look, Brother Wang, I added, twisting the knife. Brother Wang turned his head slowly, staring at Zhang Hao with a sinister intensity. Zhang Hao, the kid has a point. Since we're all about mutual aid and sharing, how about we start by inspecting your place? Yeah, Zhang Hao. Didn't you just say we should split everything equally? Sister Li's voice grew sharp and venomous. You can't expect to split everyone else's stash while keeping yours all to yourself, right? The spearhead that was originally aimed at me, within the span of just a few sentences, completely reversed its direction and lunged violently toward Zhang Hao. This is the apocalypse. This is the raw reality of human nature. Nothing is more steadfast than shared interest, yet nothing is more fragile either. Zhang Hao recoiled in a frantic panic, his back slamming against my front door. He could feel my icy gaze through the crack and the scorching pressure from the neighbors ahead. Trapped and roasting over an open flame, my place, Zhang Hao stammered incoherently. He desperately hunted for a plausible excuse. Perhaps his wife was ill, or his keys were lost, but under this high pressure, his pathetic intellect had completely short-circuited. He was terrified that a single wrong word would kill him, and even more afraid of being devoured alive by the mob. Get lost, ultimately, driven by a cocktail of sheer terror and rage. He roared that single word at Brother Wang. Brother Wang froze for a second, before his face darkened with a lethal shadow. He slammed the heavy pipe onto the floor. Fine. Zhang Hao, you think you can play us like pawns. Let's go, Brother Wang signaled the group, with a wave of his hand. We're leaving. Anyone who helps this rat from now on is a damn fool. The mob dispersed even faster than they had gathered. They were only ever united by greed, now that they realized Zhang Hao was a fraud trying to scam them for free labor, while hiding his own secret stash at home. Their resentment outweighed their initial hunger. The hallway was soon empty, leaving only Zhang Hao. He slumped against my door, looking as if his spine had been ripped out. I whispered through the door gap, Zhang Hao, the game is only just beginning. It seems your allies have abandoned you. Zhang Hao spun around violently, staring intensely at the crack in the door, the blood-red veins in his eyes looking ready to burst. He looked exactly like a rabid dog right now, desperate to bite, but with his teeth kicked in. Are you willing to return home now? I inquired once more, my voice as gentle as an old friend's. Or perhaps, do you intend to linger here for my next inquiry? For instance, regarding more intimate details about your stunning wife. At the mere mention of his wife, Zhang Hao reacted like a cat whose tail had been crushed. The afternoon's humiliation and this current defeat intertwined flawlessly, stripping him of his last shred of sanity. Yet he didn't dare lay a finger on me. The sword of the decree hung over his skull, and his neighbor's contempt felt like thorns in his back. He could only swallow his volcanic rage whole. He delivered a vicious kick to my door, letting out a howl of utter impotent fury, before spinning around and charging toward his own apartment. With a violent crash, his door slammed shut, sending a tremor through the entire building. I deliberately and calmly secured my own door. Tranquility finally returned. But I knew this was merely the eye of the storm. Men like Zhang Hao are profoundly narcissistic, and pathologically obsessed with their reputation, having suffered such a monumental loss of face, with every scheme of his crumbling to dust, and suffering total social death before his peers. He cannot vent this toxic malice upon me, nor can he direct it toward the neighbors. Therefore, within that claustrophobic space, the only soul who will bear the brunt of his rage is the person he views as his mere personal property, Lin Shui. I stepped toward the wall to monitor the sounds. Inevitably, the audio cues began to bleed through. The shattering of glass and porcelain, The hysterical, incoherent curses of a man, and the hopeless gut-wrenching wails of a woman. You useless parasite. You treacherous, ungrateful bitch. Zhang Hao's roars, even dampened by two thick walls, were still terrifyingly audible. Did you tell him we had food stashed away? Was it you? Was it? Following the sharp, stinging crack of a slap, Lin Shu's shriek pierced through the silence. I reclined on my sofa and slowly closed my eyes. As the minutes bled into hours, the world outside was swallowed by total darkness. The sounds of the assault next door persisted for an eternity, only fading into a grim silence deep in the night. I knew the perfect moment had finally arrived. The door that Zhang Hao had slammed, shut with his own hands, would soon be forced open once more. Sitting in the shadows, I kept a steady gaze on the entrance. Predictably, after roughly 30 minutes, 30 minutes. Faint spectral footsteps echoed from the hallway. Then came a knock so delicate, it was practically a whisper. There it is. I rose and approached the door, peering through the peephole once again. Under the dismal, sickly glow of the moonlight, I beheld a face ravaged by tears and brutal bruises. It was Lin Shui. She was clutching her son Xiaobao against her chest. She simply stood there like a ghost. I knew she was gambling, betting on whether I'd grant her entry, betting on whether I'd offer her a path to survival. Of course I was willing, but not out of some misplaced sense of mercy. It was because she was the final puzzle piece needed to annihilate Zhang Hao. Taking her in would destroy his soul more than killing him ever could. I didn't reach for the handle immediately. Instead, I leaned my lips against the freezing metal, my voice dropping to a low, intimate murmur that only the two of us could hear. Lin Shui, standing at my threshold like this, is there a specific question you wish to ask? The silhouette outside shuddered violently. From the darkness, her trembling voice finally broke through. She choked on that single word, dissolving into sobs. I waited with the patience of a saint, like a calculated hunter, guiding his prey into the killing blow. What you're really asking is, are you willing to give me and my child something to eat? I finished for her. She lapsed into a heavy silence, before a weak but unmistakable word escaped her lips. Yes. Or perhaps... I shifted my tone instantly, injecting a trace of cold, piercing scrutiny into my voice. Are you asking if I'm willing to take you both in and grant you a sanctuary where you'll finally be safe? This question carried infinitely more weight than the last. Accepting food was merely a transaction, but seeking refuge meant absolute betrayal and total submission. The silence outside stretched for an agonizing 30 seconds. I could practically feel the psychological war raging in her mind. Finally, as if draining the last drop of her strength, she spoke with a raspy yet resolute voice. Yes. I slowly rested my hand upon the heavy lock and cracked the door open. Lin Shuo was a vision of absolute misery outside. Her matted hair was plastered to her cheeks. Her lip was split and oozing blood, and a vivid, violent handprint on her left cheek had already begun to swell into a deep purple. Little Bao huddled in her trembling arms, had eyes wide with pure unadulterated terror, his tiny hands clutching his mother's collar for dear life. She stared at me, her gaze a chaotic storm of fear, desperate pleading, and the grim resolve of someone pushed to the brink. I offered her a gentle, almost disturbingly friendly smile. Then I dropped my ultimate ultimatum. Lin Shui, the question you're truly dying to ask is, are you willing to accept my absolute protection, manage my household affairs, and handle the daily chores, in exchange for food and total security for you and your son? Is that correct? I emphasized the words protection and manage heavily. This wasn't charity. It was a contract. I'm no saint. I'm the boss. She froze, stunned, clearly not expecting me to lay out the cold, hard terms so bluntly. But she only hesitated for a single heartbeat, because from behind the neighbor's door, Zhang Hao's muffled, venomous cursing erupted again. That sound was like a viper, slithering up her ankle. She shuddered violently, tears streaming down her face, before she looked at me and gave a heavy, decisive nod. Yes, I stepped aside, clearing the entrance. Then welcome to the team, as if granted a divine pardon. Clutching her child, Lin Shui practically stumbled and lunged into my home. I slammed the door and threw the deadbolt, permanently sealing that man's world away from us. Almost the exact second the lock clicked into place, Zhang Hao finally realized what had happened next door. He let out a primal animalistic roar, followed by the sound of him frantically battering the door. Lin Shui, you backstabbing bitch. Get the hell out here and open this door. How dare you betray me? I'm going to freaking kill you. Lin Shui froze instantly, her face turning a deathly shade of ash, clutching her child while trembling like a leaf in a gale. I stepped up beside her and gave her shoulder a dismissive pat. Cut the act. Those cheap, pathetic tears of yours are only moving to you and the trash can. I spoke with chilling indifference. From this moment forward, you and the kid are safe within these walls. She lifted her head, staring at me in utter disbelief. I gestured toward the sofa in the living room. Settle in for now. Your official duties begin tomorrow morning. Outside, Zhang Hao's roars and frantic pounding persisted, sounding like a pathetic anthem of impotent rage. But inside my sanctuary, all was tranquil. The dawn of a new day began with the predictable soundtrack of Zhang Hao's curses. The shouting was intermittent, lacking any real creativity. Just the same tired obscenities looped over and over. I turned a deaf ear to the noise, retrieving milk and fresh toast from the fridge. To prepare breakfast with slow, deliberate movements, Lin Xue and Little Bao sat huddled on the sofa, both appearing incredibly restless and ill at ease. Little Bao's stomach let out an ill-timed growl. Lin Xue's face grew even paler. I slid a portion of breakfast toward her. Eat up. Once you're finished, your labor begins immediately. Lin Xue accepted the food as if receiving a royal gift, delicately feeding her child while not daring to take a bite herself. I ignored her, finishing my own meal, before wiping my mouth clean. I retrieved a walkie-talkie from the storage room, along with a small handwritten note, and handed them over. Take this and knock on door 301. Lin Xue stared at the scrap of paper, her hands trembling slightly. The note contained a single line, Auntie Wang. Are you willing to trade every cigarette and bottle of alcohol in your home for 3 liters of purified water and 2 packs of instant noodles in Nekikite? She looked up at me, her eyes completely consumed by terror. Zhang Hao is out there, but he won't dare lay a finger on you. I stared at her, my voice flat and cold. You belong to me now. If he touches you, it's equivalent to him asking me, are you willing to let me die? My words seemed to inject a surge of strength into her. She took a ragged deep breath, as if finally steeling her resolve. Clutching her child, she gripped the radio and the note, heading for the door. Through the security feed, I had a front row seat to every detail in the hallway. Lin Xue rapped on the door of Unit 301. Almost instantaneously, the door directly opposite mine swung open with a violent crash. Zhang Hao lunged out like a rabid red-eyed predator, unshaven for days, and with hollowed-out sunken eyes. He radiated a stench of pure desperation. You actually dared to show your face. He roared, reaching out to savagely snatch Lin Xue's hair. Lin Xue shrieked in terror, bracing herself with eyes shut tight, but his hand froze mid-air. Via the walkie-talkie, my icy voice echoed through the corridor. Zhang Hao. Are you absolutely certain you want to touch her? Zhang Hao's entire body paralyzed. He slowly turned his head, glaring death at the camera lens above my door. His gaze screamed that he wanted to devour me alive. Yet he remained utterly impotent to act. The door to 301 creaked open. Auntie Wang poked her head out. Lin Xue, trembling, passed the note over to her. After reading it, Auntie Wang barely hesitated. She scurried back and returned with an armful of cigarettes and liquor. The transaction was completed without a hitch, cradling the supplies. Lin Xue kept her head down and hurried back to my sanctuary, never daring to spare Zhang Hao a single glance. Right in front of Zhang Hao's face, I had Lin Xue inventory the hall, then rewarded Little Bao with a ham sausage. This scene was undeniably the final straw that broke the camel's back. Zhang Hao let out a harrowing, blood-curdling howl. He had completely snapped. He no longer cared about the damn rules. Like a maddened but berserk bull, he charged headlong toward my front door. A thunderous crash echoed through the hall, but my reinforced steel-plated security door didn't budge a single millimeter. Only the exact spot where his body collided showed a faint microscopic dent. Lin Xue and her son recoiled into the corner, their faces completely drained of color. I simply smirked. Finally, he's resorted to primitive violence. Unfortunate for him, it's also the most idiotic. I stepped to the door, ignoring the peephole, and flipped an inconspicuous switch on the wall. Outside, Zhang Hao raised his fist to strike again, but his entire body instantly seized up, as if slammed by an invisible sledgehammer. His spine arched backward violently, his limbs twitching in a series of horrific convulsions. His hair stood on end, and from his throat, a wheezing, raspy gurgle escaped. The high-voltage grid I'd hidden in the door was working. A few seconds later, I cut the power. Zhang Hao collapsed like a heap of wet laundry, sliding down the frame and onto the floor. The acrid stench of scorched flesh began to waft through the air. I pulled the door back, opening it just a sliver, wide enough for me to witness his state, and for him to gaze upon me. He lay there on the cold tiles, gasping like a dying fish out of water, drawing in ragged, desperate breaths. His eyes were nothing but vacant craters of despair. Lin Xue stood behind me, staring at the wretched sight of her former husband, her lips trembling, with a storm of complex emotions. The time had come. I looked down at the pathetic wreck on the ground, and spoke with a freezing detachment. Each word was a precise surgical blade, designed to carve through his final mental defenses. Zhang Hao, you're about to admit, aren't you, that if I hadn't reinforced this door, or installed that electric grid, you would have already forced your way inside. His entire frame shuddered. He couldn't deny the truth of it. I continued my interrogation, my voice low and steady. Yet every word was a lethal blow. You're about to admit it, aren't you, that once you broke in, you'd seize all my supplies, and then you would proceed to vent all your savage fury on Lin Xue and me. inflicting irreparable trauma upon us both. A strangled animalistic whimper escaped Zhang Hao's throat. He glanced toward Lin Shua standing behind me, his gaze finally betraying a flicker of pathetic desperation. Lin Shua instinctively recoiled a step further, severing all eye contact with him. That single retreat utterly demolished his remaining spirit. I stared into his dead, vacant eyes, and delivered the final, most merciful judgment. Zhang Hao, Eo, are you willing to surrender every remaining scrap of food and supplies in your home to me, just to earn the privilege of seeing your own son once a day? Zhang Hao's pupils dilated and went hollow in that instant, leaving him looking like a boneless, spineless mollusk. He slumped against the floor, lacking even the strength to twitch a muscle. After several seconds of deathly silence, a fractured, broken syllable scraped out of his throat, sounding like rusted iron grinding against stone. Yes, that one word drained every last drop of his dignity and vitality. Behind me, Lin Shui's entire body swayed almost imperceptibly. She braced herself against the wall and tightly shut her eyes. I slammed the door shut with zero emotion, bottling up the pathetic wreck outside. Lin Shua, are you willing to help me inventory the new supplies? I turned and asked her with terrifying calm. Her eyes snapped open, brimming with sheer panic and profound confusion, which eventually dissolved into a numb, fatalistic acceptance. She gave a slow, rhythmic nod. I pulled the door open again. Zhang Hao was still sprawled in the exact same spot, looking like a discarded carcass. I didn't spare him another glance, marching straight to the unit opposite mine. Using the keys he had just surrendered, I unlocked his front door. A wave of stagnant sour air, mingled with the stench of sweat, hit me instantly. The living room was an absolute disaster zone. Leftover crusty instant noodle cups and shredded snack bags were littered everywhere. The sofa was shoved haphazardly to the side, stained with various unidentifiable blotches. This place no longer resembled the warm, tidy home filled with laughter that I remembered. Lin Shua trailed behind me, and as she surveyed the chaotic wreckage, her eyes instantly welled up with tears. I knew exactly what memories were haunting her, but I had zero interest in offering comfort. Cut the performance, those cheap tears are only moving to you and the trash can. My voice was like shards of ice, instantly killing her emotional moment. Her entire body stiffened, and she forced herself to swallow her sobs. Call me vicious, I don't care. In this apocalypse, sympathy is the ultimate liability. Lin Shua and I began silently hauling the haul. Zhang Hao had been holding out quite a hoard. Besides the scraps I tossed to Lin Shua, there were several cases of biscuits, stacks of canned goods, and assorted snacks. The real jackpot was 2 massive jugs of purified water. But just as I hoisted the final crate of compressed rations, a black hard-covered notebook slipped from the crevice between the box and the wall. It hit the floor with a sharp thud. I froze. Lin Shua spotted it too and instinctively reached down. Don't touch it, I commanded my internal alarm system screaming at full volume. A crude thug like Zhang Hao having a diary. What kind of secrets were buried in there? I crouched down low, refraining from touching the book immediately. My gaze scanned it like a searchlight, dissecting every single detail of the notebook. A generic black cover, completely devoid of any branding or decoration. It didn't look like a private journal for feelings, but more like a cold set of operational notes. I reached out, my fingertips grazing the chilly, smooth surface. Slowly I peeled back the first page. An unfamiliar script, frantic and bordering on insane, practically lunged out and stabbed at my eyes. Month X, day X, weather clear? Damn it! They've come back again. Back in this godforsaken hellhole again. Still stuck on the eve of the apocalypse. Why the hell does it have to be me? My heart felt as if an invisible, monstrous hand had violently clenched it, causing my pulse to flatline. A wave of icy sweat broke out, racing down my spine and pooling at my tailbone. I truly believed that I was the world's sole regressor, a god holding the ultimate script to the future. But this diary hit me like a stinging slap, viciously striking me right across the face. It turns out I'm not the only one. Zhang Hao is a regressor too. My mind began racing at terminal velocity, as countless overlooked details and red flags instantly connected into one terrifying, complete picture. Why did he target me with such surgical precision on day one? Why did my massive hoard of survival supplies not elicit even a shred of surprise from him? Only raw, unadulterated greed. Why was he so quick to react to my logical counter-traps, even immediately pivoting to incite the neighbors? Because just like me, he carries the scars and memories of a past life. I forced my racing heart to settle and continued scanning the pages. The entries were chaotic and deranged, overflowing with curses and psychic venting. But the hidden intel made my scalp crawl with dread. In the last life I died on the 7th day. That man used a single cursed rhetorical question to plunder everything I had. Did I starve? No. Wait, I didn't die of starvation. I was slaughtered by them. That man has no clue that never say no isn't even the deadliest part of the rules. The true horror is lurking just around the corner. They are coming monsters with a lethal, insta-kill reaction to the word no. The second you deny them, you'll be shredded into raw meat. That bastard thinks he's won. He hasn't realized yet that the supplies he stole will only turn him into their very first hunting target. In this life, I'll make sure to strike before he can. I'll force him to taste the exact same despair I felt. My fingers gripped the edge of the notebook with a death grip, my knuckles turning a skeletal white. So Zhang Hao didn't actually starve to death in the last timeline. After I successfully plundered all of his supplies, he crossed paths with one of those abominations because he couldn't satisfy the creature's demands and was forbidden from saying no. The monster eventually tore him to shreds, and his primary target upon regressing was me. He didn't just want my survival horde, he wanted to trap me in the same gruesome death he suffered. What a diabolically twisted scheme. If I hadn't been one step ahead of his games, the person currently lying on the floor like a dead dog would have been me. I slammed the notebook shut and took a long, stabilizing breath, forcing my racing heart to finally settle down beyond the initial wave of paralyzing fear. I felt a deep sense of relief and a flicker of excitement. Zhang Hao, thank you for this incredible gift. This intel is 10,000 times more valuable than the food. So what if there's another regressor? So what if there are new monsters to face? This apocalyptic survival game just got a hell of a lot more interesting. Right at that moment, a sound that was definitely not human, a roar dripping with eerie primal violence, echoed from far outside the window. Lin Shui and her son shrieked, huddling together in terror. I strode to the window, peeling back a corner of the curtain to peer out. The real apocalypse is only just beginning. The roars outside were like a rusted saw blade, repeatedly hacking through the silence of the dark night. Within that sound was a thick, viscous malice that felt entirely alien. Even through these thick walls, it made my skin crawl. Lin Shui and her son Peng Ping were already paralyzed with a ghostly pallor. The pair clung to each other in the corner of the sofa. I approached the window, cautiously lifting a tiny sliver of the curtain. The streetlights below had been extinguished at some unknown point. In the shadows, a contorted silhouette was moving in an incredibly grotesque manner, sluggishly lurching toward our apartment building. It looked human enough with all four limbs intact, but its joints seemed to be snapped backward with every agonizing step. Its torso jerked with an unnatural convulsion, emitting a sickening crack of dislocated bone. These are the forbidden beasts from Zhang Hao's diary. It halted right at the entrance of our unit, tilting its head up to reveal a face that was nothing more than a blank sheet of smooth skin. No eyes, no ears, no mouth, no nose, only a dark swirling vortex spinning slowly in the center. I clamped my hand over my mouth, not daring to breathe. Suddenly the monstrosity froze. The black hole on its face locked onto my exact location. A wave of freezing, utterly emotionless telepathic intent seared itself directly into my consciousness. Are you willing to share your warmth with me? My heart skipped a beat. The death inquiry had arrived. Zhang Hao's diary laid it out with brutal clarity. In his previous life, he was slaughtered during a forbidden beast interrogation. Saying no means being instantly shredded into ribbons, but saying yes doesn't guarantee survival either. The question was a psychological minefield. Warmth. Is it my body heat or the temperature of my room? If I consent to this, will it phase through the walls and drain the very life from my marrow? Zhang Hao's notes mentioned that he couldn't satisfy the beast's demands, meaning the yes is followed by impossible conditions. It was a lethal, inescapable checkmate. My brain began operating at terminal velocity. Think I have to stay calm. The rules are rigid, but humans are adaptable. If it's a question, there must be a loophole to exploit. I can't refuse, but I can deliberately misinterpret the premise, or better yet, offer a counter proposition. Staring down at that nightmare below, I channeled my intent into a single sharp thought and projected it back with lethal intent. What you're really asking is, am I willing to trade this cup of hot water in my hand in exchange for you vanishing from my sight immediately? In my grip was a steaming mug I had just poured to warm my frozen fingers. At this critical juncture, the scalding temperature became my only lifeline. I took the ambiguous concept of warmth, and substituted it with a tangible object, hot water. Simultaneously, I dictated my own terms, you vanish immediately. The forbidden beast below froze mid-motion. The dark vortex on its face stopped its rhythmic spinning, seemingly struggling to process this unprecedented piece of logical bribery. Every second bled into the next, each moment feeling as agonizingly long as a century. My back was completely drenched in a cold, deathly sweat. Finally, that chilling mental intent echoed in my skull once more. Yes, the very instant the word resonated, the forbidden beast's distorted physical form began to flicker like static on a dying television screen. A few heartbeats later, it vanished into thin air. I played it right. My strength deserted me instantly, and I slumped against the freezing wall, gasping for air in ragged, desperate gulps. However, before I could even savor the relief, a thunderous crash erupted from across the hall. Zhang Hao's front door was violently kicked open. Zhang Hao charged out, his hair disheveled and wild. His eyes were a roadmap of burst capillaries, and a manic, delirious grin was plastered on his face. He saw me standing there unscathed. He saw Lin Shui and the child sheltered behind me. The twisted smile on his face contorted even further. Why the hell are you still alive? He roared at the top of his lungs, sounding like a predator driven into a dead end. But just then, the forbidden beast that had just vanished reappeared in the corridor without a single warning, materializing directly in Zhang Hao's path. The black hole on its face locked onto Zhang Hao as that icy, telepathic command descended once more. Are you willing to share your despair with me? The entire world seemed to freeze. Even Zhang Hao was momentarily stunned. But then he suddenly erupted into a fit of earth-shattering hysterical laughter. Ha 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 ha. Despair. Despair is the only damn thing I have left in my soul. You want it? Take it all, he laughed, opening his arms wide, as he marched straight toward the forbidden beast. He didn't offer a counter question. He didn't struggle. And he didn't display a single shred of hesitation. Having lost his wife and child, forfeited every last scrap of his supplies, and failed utterly in his quest for revenge, all before being cornered by his pre-regression nightmare. His mind had finally completely shattered, to a man broken like him. Death was likely the only true escape left. The forbidden beast seemed gratified by his response. In the following heartbeat, its movements accelerated beyond human comprehension. I caught only a glimpse of a dark silhouette lunging, accompanied by a sharp ear-piercing whistle of wind. Countless obsidian tentacles erupted from its form, acting like a flurry of serrated blades that instantly skewered Zhang Hao's body. Zhang Hao's lifeless frame collapsed into a heap. Lin Shui let out a blood-curdling shriek before blacking out on the spot. I meanwhile clamped my hand over the child's eyes. After finalizing its business with Zhang Hao, the forbidden beast vanished, taking the corpse with it. Nothing remained in the hallway but a suffocating stench of iron. I felt no surge of triumph or vengeful joy. I realized that true retribution isn't just watching your enemy perish, it's the moment they finally die, and you realize you feel absolutely nothing at all. Zhang Hao was gone, but this demented world was only just beginning its show. Personal vendettas and petty grudges, in the face of such a colossal existential crisis, were as insignificant as a single speck of dust. Just then, another harrowing scream echoed from below, but this time it was unmistakably human. Following it was the feeble, desperate plea of an old man. Help someone. Please save me. That voice, it was Old Man Wang. In my previous life, when I was on the brink of starvation, it was Old Man Wang from downstairs, who had secretly slid something through my door. Half of a stale rock-hard mantou bun. I lunged toward the window instantly. There another forbidden beast had pinned Old Man Wang against the downstairs flower bed. The beast's icy intent began to vibrate through the air. At that very moment, my blood surged and boiled like never before. In that split second, I made my move. Lin Shui, guard the house. No matter what you hear, don't open up. I snatched a bottle of high concentration, rubbing alcohol I had prepped earlier, along with a windproof torch lighter. I violently yanked the door open and bolted to the stairwell, shouting down at the monstrosity that was, unleashing its tentacles toward Old Man Wang. Hey, you faceless freak down there. What you're really trying to ask is, are you willing to ditch that shriveled old geezer in exchange for a fresh high energy young man coming down to offer himself to you? The air in the stairwell instantly turned to ice. The forbidden beast caught mid-slaughter, froze in its tracks. That blank face with the swirling abyss slowly tilted up, locking onto me through the pitch-black corridor. Logical substitution successfully triggered once again. Compared to an old man whose life force had nearly evaporated, my freshly regressed soul was a 5-star gourmet feast to a creature like that. A wave of icy ravenous intent slammed into my mind. Yes, it abandoned Old Man Wang immediately, scrambling up the stairs toward me with terrifying speed. Shaolan, run for your life. Don't worry about me. Old Man Wang's tearful voice wailed from below. Run. A manic smirk spread across my lips. In a world ruled by these twisted laws, running is the most futile thing you can do. Aggressive offense is the only true path to survival. I stood firm at the landing between the second and third floors. This cramped narrow space was the perfect ambush point. The moment the creature's silhouette rounded the corner and came into view, I didn't hesitate for even a millisecond. I hurled the uncapped bottle of alcohol directly into the dark vortex of its face. Simultaneously, I sparked the windproof lighter. And next you're asking, are you willing to accept this? Passionate baptism to warm your freezing body. The flame traced an elegant arc through the air. The monster's primitive logic was still processing the concepts of passion and warmth, and its inherent nature made it impossible to refuse such a seemingly positive proposal. Gassy blue flames erupted instantly within the claustrophobic stairwell. The alcohol splashed across the beast's skin, transforming it into a searing shroud of agony. The creature unleashed an ear-piercing shrill shriek. It wasn't simply being burned to death, but rather suffering a total breakdown from the violent physical trauma, clashing with the logic of warmth. Its core rules were spiraling into a chaotic glitch. It slammed into the walls like a frenzied animal, obsidian tentacles thrashing wildly in the air, shredding the stairwell railings into scrap metal. seizing the moment of its total disorientation. I delivered the finishing blow. You're suffering, aren't you? Then are you willing to stop breathing right now? To make this excruciating pain vanish forever. It was a lethal, inescapable logic trap. To cease the agony. It had to consent to ending its own life. The monster convulsed violently amidst the inferno, before the telepathic yes could fully manifest. Its body withered like a deflating balloon, instantly collapsing into a heap. It dissolved into a puddle of black sludge sizzling in the fire. I leaned against the wall, gasping for oxygen, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged beast. I won the gamble again. Downstairs, Old Man Wang scrambled up, still trembling, tears streaming down his face as he moved to kneel. Xiaolan, you risked everything to save these old bones of mine. I caught him before he could drop, my gaze cutting past him toward the floors above. One by one, doors began to crack open in the shadows. The commotion was far too loud to ignore. Every rat in the building had been flushed out. They witnessed me slay the abomination, and they saw me play the hero. Right now, those eyes held more than just fear. They were brimming with naked greed, because they realized I possessed the power, and more importantly, I possessed the horde. Old Man Wang, I shouted, projecting my voice, with a freezing razor-sharp edge, against the apocalyptic wind. In my past life, you once shared half a bun with me. Today, I've repaid that debt with your life. Consider us even. I released my grip, and unsheathed a jagged boning knife from my waist. The blade gleamed with a lethal frost under the flickering firelight. I stepped deliberately into the center of the corridor, my gaze piercing through the shadows where those prying eyes hid. My dear neighbors, have you seen enough of the show? The hallway fell into a deathly suffocating silence. Not a single soul dared to make a sound. I know exactly what's crossing your minds. You want to plunder my horde? And you want me to be your human shield? I let out a sharp, mocking scoff. Fine, the moment that word left my lips. Several doors creaked wider in anticipation. However, my tone shifted instantly, becoming dark and predatory. In this world where no is a death sentence, I am the sole translator of the rules. You witnessed Zhang Hao's gruesome end just now, and you saw how I dealt with those two abominations. If you want to survive in 10 minutes, bring every last scrap of supplies you own, and assemble outside my door. Everything will be redistributed, and I will teach you the secret to staying alive. Of course, I brandished the jagged knife, my eyes radiating a malice more terrifying than any monster's. You are perfectly free to stay behind. But I will have one question for those who don't show up. Are you willing to bet the lives of your entire family that my blade isn't fast enough to slit your throats? In that defining moment, I was no longer the pathetic victim Zhang Hao could bully. I had become the judge, jury, and executioner of this building. 10 minutes later, the third-floor hallway was packed with people. Not a single person dared to gamble on the answer to my question. Even the tatted thug from the 5th floor, usually the loudest, was now meekly clutching a case of instant noodles, shrinking back into the crowd with his head down. Fear is the most effective tool of governance, and true strategy is always built upon the foundation of absolute violence. When Lin Shui opened the door and beheld this sight, she gasped, covering her mouth in pure shock. Lin Shui, get your notebook and start recording. I didn't even bother to turn around, as I issued my decree. From this day forward, you are the quartermaster. All supplies will be centralized in my vault, distributed strictly based on labor and merit. Old Man Wang, you're well respected around here. You're in charge of keeping an eye on this lot. If anyone dares to hoard supplies, or pull some shady stunts behind my back, report to me instantly. Old Man Wang straightened his posture, looking like he'd regained his youthful vigor. Right. Xiaolan, no, Mr. Leader, consider it done. I'll see who dares to step out of line. Someone in the crowd twitched their lips, looking like they wanted to protest. I shot them a piercing glare, and they instantly looked away. I don't feed freeloaders, and I don't tolerate hidden threats. I looked over this ragtag bunch of losers, and dropped the first iron law of my new empire. Inside this sanctuary, my questions are absolute decrees. You only need to answer with one word, yes? Now tell me, are you willing to surrender your loyalty and your lives to my absolute control just to stay alive? In the cramped, suffocating hallway, dozens of voices chimed in unevenly, yet they merged into a new power born of desperation. Yes, from that defining moment, the ordinary survivor known as Lan Bai vanished. In his place stood the new sovereign holding the power of life and death. Throughout the following week, I led them in reinforcing the stairwells and sealing off every window on the lower floors, transforming this dilapidated residential building into an impenetrable steel fortress. I trained them on how to use logic to bypass the monster's lethal inquiries, and how to utilize leading questions to scavenge for essential resources. The ranks were growing, and people were finally uniting. Once the camp was fully operational, I became the de facto king. Lin Shui served as my chief of staff, managing the registry and distribution of all supplies. Old Man Wang became my eyes and ears, patrolling the halls daily to eavesdrop on any complaints or suspicious activity. But where there are people, there is friction. There's always a genius or two who thinks they've mastered the rhythm of the rules and wants to test my authority. The clown stepping up today is a man sporting a pair of glasses, a refined-looking individual named Lee Kang. He'd been remarkably proactive since joining the camp, leveraging his knowledge of radio technology to repair our long-range communications, earning him quite a bit of merit. Right now, he's standing at the distribution point, facing Lin Shui with a smirk. Sister Lin notes, I'd like to use a specific piece of intel to barter for some supplies from the camp. How does that sound to you? Following the strict protocols I established, Lin Sui gave a formal robotic response. Brother Lee, your point is that you are willing to offer your intel in exchange for supplies of equal value from our vault. Correct, this was the first firewall I'd set up. The emphasis on equal value. Li Kang adjusted his glasses, a sharp glint reflecting off the lenses. No. My question is, he punctuated every word, his voice not particularly loud, yet carrying enough weight for the entire queue to hear. As the leader's representative, are you willing to trade half of our canned food stockpile in exchange for my solemn promise to provide one crucial life-saving piece of intel in the future? Will you take this deal? The area plummeted into an instant silence. Every single pair of eyes shifted from the food crates to my face. Half of the canned goods. That's practically half of our camp's entire economic backbone. Trading our concrete foundation for survival, for a vague ethereal promise. This was a classic empty-handed scam. He wasn't really questioning Lin Shui. He was challenging me. He was weaponizing the rules with surgical precision. You cannot say no. If I refused, how would the rules punish me? Nobody knew and nobody dared to find out. But if I agreed, my authority would crumble into dust in a heartbeat. If he can scam half the food with a promise today, tomorrow someone will trade a ghost story for our entire water supply. Order would be utterly extinguished. I crossed my arms and slowly emerged from the back of the crowd. I stepped right into his space and smirked. Li Kang, that is a fascinating question you've posed. The corners of his mouth twitched into a smug, unstoppable grin. However, I think I misheard you slightly. Would you like me to help you translate your question more accurately so everyone here can truly grasp your intent? I locked onto his eyes, and without giving him a second to breathe, I fired off my counter-query at high velocity. What you're really saying is, you want to ask me, are you willing to let me, Li Kang, take the survival rations that keep everyone here alive, and hand over half of them to me for absolutely nothing, betting our lives on a worthless, zero-value verbal promise that I might fulfill someday? Is that exactly what you mean? My voice suddenly reached a crescendo, each syllable striking like a hollow point bullet, shot directly at every soul in the room. The smug satisfaction on Li Kang's face instantly calcified. He never expected me to dodge his trap entirely. Instead, I had dragged his filthy hidden agenda straight into the unforgiving light of day. Then, I displayed his bloody intentions for the whole crowd to see. The crowd began to stir with restless energy, their gazes shifting from mere curiosity to cold judging suspicion directed at Li Kang. Beads of cold sweat began to erupt on his forehead, his lips trembling with desperate motion. Yet he couldn't force out a single word, because he was forbidden from saying no. Saying no. If he denied it, he'd be admitting that his original question carried the exact malicious meaning I had just translated. I took a menacing step forward, invading his personal bubble until we were nose to nose, dropping my voice to a lethal whisper. I spoke so only he could hear. Give it up. Your pathetic little scheme is only impressive to you and the trash can. Then I suddenly recoiled, pivoting back to face the entire assembly. Or perhaps, Li Kang, you actually intended to ask everyone a different question. My gaze swept across every single face in the line. Do you want to ask every person standing here, are you all willing to place your trust in a man who contributes absolutely zero value in this apocalypse, but instead exploits loopholes to drain our collective survival stash, while treating every single one of you like a brainless pawn? The crowd erupted in a volcanic fury. Damn, so that was his endgame? I knew this rat was up to no good, trading a hollow promise for half our food. He basically wants us all to slave away for his benefit. Li Kang's face instantly drained of color, turning a sickly ashen. He was powerless to deny a single word I uttered, as the invisible iron chains of the rules were clamped tight around his throat. Every second of his silence served as a tacit admission of guilt. I stared him down, observing him like a cornered rat caught in a lethal trap. The hour of public execution had finally arrived. I raised my hand, signaling the angry crowd to fall silent. Li Kang, I'm granting you one final opportunity to pose a question. I locked my gaze onto his shifty, darting eyes, enunciating every single syllable with chilling clarity. Isn't there one last thing you want to ask everyone? Everyone I, Li Kang, was momentarily possessed by greed, and attempted to sabotage our collective interest with logic traps and egos, just to satisfy my own selfish petty cravings. I'm ready to face the consequences. Are you all willing to kick me out of this camp forever? The moment that question was aired, the entire corridor plunged into a tomb-like silence. Li Kang began to shake violently from head to toe, his eyes wide with a mixture of raw terror and pathetic pleading. Every person present stared him down, waiting for him to utter those words. Or perhaps more accurately, they were waiting for me to speak them on his behalf. Since he wouldn't speak, I would become his voice. I turned toward the survivors, projecting my voice so it echoed through the halls. Are you willing to let a man who tried to fracture us, Shikik, and destroy the very foundation of our trust, continue to reside among us, just so he can have a second, or a third chance to plunge us all into the abyss? Yes, we're willing. Throw him out. We're willing. This time the response was a thunderous unison, absolutely deafening in its conviction. Under the shadow of the never say no rule, this became our camp's very first unanimous referendum. Li Kang collapsed onto the floor, a spineless heap. His face was as pale as a corpse. I stared down at him with cold indifference, not a single ripple of emotion in my heart. You heard the verdict. I turned away, refusing to grant him another glance. Lin Shui gave him a bottle of water and 1 pack of biscuits, and then show him the exit. Absolute authority was officially established at this moment. Right then, the radio in the corner that Li Kang had repaired suddenly erupted with a piercing screech of static. An unfamiliar voice, heavy with a haunting echo, began to emanate from the speakers. Survivors across the city said, "Greetings. Are you willing to cease your feudal resistance and join the Unified Human Destiny Initiative?" The voice sounded as if it crawled out of the abyss, transmitted through distorted radio waves, to burrow directly into our eardrums. Surrender all of your stockpiled supplies, abandon your pathetic private territories, and accept the supreme efficiency of our unified rule. Are you willing? The man on the broadcast made no overt threats. His monotone delivery was as calm as someone reading a routine weather report. But it was precisely this eerie tranquility that sent a bone-chilling shiver crawling from our heels to the base of our skulls. This was a gambit in open challenge, laid out in broad daylight, yet a massive trap that seemed impossible to refuse. Behind me, the survivors, who had just felt a flicker of relief from Li Kang's exile, found their expressions frozen in terror. Panic flooded the hallway like an invisible rising tide. Old Man Wang's lips trembled as he looked toward me, his eyes overflowing with sheer desperation. Lin Sui instinctively pulled her child closer behind her, her face turning a ghostly shade of white. Every person's gaze focused on me like a searchlight, drilling into my very soul. In their desperate eyes, I was a god capable of defying the very laws of nature. But only I knew the terrifying truth. I am no god. I'm just an ordinary man who happens to have the experience of dying once before. The man behind this broadcast is a different beast compared to Zhang Hao or Li Kang. Those two were just petty thugs exploiting rules for scraps. But this guy is playing an entirely different game. He doesn't just understand the rules, he's discovered how to amplify their power to a massive scale through mass communication. He doesn't need to knock on every single door. He just sits in one spot and questions the whole city, imposing his twisted will upon every soul within range of a radio signal. My reggressor's advantage was neutralized in a heartbeat. When everyone suddenly holds the launch codes to a nuke, the single bullet I prepped ahead of time is no longer the ultimate trump card. The pressure was like a physical slab of granite, crushing down on my heart. Do we just hunker down and wait? Wait for him to fire off one undeniable question after another, bleeding our meager resources dry, until we're forced to voluntarily walk out and become his mindless slaves? Or, my gaze swept across the terror-stricken faces of the crowd, lingering on the innocent, confused eyes of Lin Shui's child. No, I didn't claw my way back from hell, just to find a different location and a new way to die all over again. I took a deep, steadying breath, forcibly shoving down the irritation and panic swirling in my chest. I looked at them and spoke with measured calm. I am the mountain, not the stream. The crowd was stunned, completely failing to grasp my meaning. I let a small smirk play on my lips, one devoid of any warmth, sharp and cold as a winter gale. A stream will be swallowed by a larger river, but a mountain simply stands its ground. I stepped toward the crackling radio, reached out under the horrified gazes of the survivors, and slowly snapped the antenna in half. With a sharp, brittle crack, the grating voice from the broadcast cut out instantly. The entire world became blessedly silent. I turned back to face the dumbfounded crowd. He asked if we're willing, but he forgot that we possess the power of inquiry too. Staying holed up here is the same as surrendering our agency to a stranger. We would become mere slabs of meat on a butcher's block, waiting for him to decide where the next cut lands. Are you really okay with that? Silence filled the room, but their white-knuckled fists and bloodshot eyes screamed the answer I needed. Excellent. I strode to the wall, where a tattered city map, scavenged during a supply run, was pinned. My fingertip pressed firmly onto the very center, right on the icon for the radio and television tower. Instead of waiting for him to track us down, we're going to hunt him first. Lin Shui. I barked the order and she instantly stood at attention. Inventory every weapon and operational vehicle we have. Select the 3 strongest, most sharp-witted individuals to form a strike team. Yes, old man Wong, you and the remaining survivors will immediately begin the final reinforcement of this building. From this moment on, this is our fortress and our final line of defense. I paused for a second, letting my gaze burn into every person there. Remember, we aren't going there to surrender, nor are we going there to negotiate. My voice dropped to a sub-zero chill, heavy with unquestionable resolve. I'm going there to show him this city has 2 kings, or rather that very soon there will only be one. We set out in a heavily modified off-road SUV, its front end reinforced with jagged steel plating, looking like a silent predator, prowling through the dead abandoned city. No one spoke inside the cabin. There was only the low guttural thrum of the engine, and the rhythmic crunch of gravel under the tires. The 3 recruits Lin Shui handpicked. One was Li Mo, an ex-soldier, handling the driving and tactical recon. The others were twins Da Mao and Mao, former pro-fitness trainers, built like absolute tanks, white-knuckling their fire axes with grim intensity. Before long, we arrived at the foot of our destination. Their headquarters was even more of a high-security fortress than I'd anticipated. Li Mo killed the engine 50 meters away, from the first perimeter checkpoint. Boss, what's the move? Those guys are packing heat. Li Mo's voice was raspy with nerves. I kicked the car door open and stepped out into the open alone. Behind the barricade, at least half a dozen black muzzles were locked onto my chest. A man acting as a lead sentry bellowed at me from across the distance. Are you willing to turn around and leave this place immediately? A clever opening gambit. I couldn't simply answer yes to this, nor could I ever say no, because the moment I said no by the literal definition of the rules, I'd be refusing to leave, which was effectively surrendering to their mercy. But I just smirked, stopping in my tracks. I projected my voice clearly. I'm here to see your leader. Tell me, are you actually asking, are you willing to drop all your defenses and enter our base entirely alone, to submit to our interrogation? I took an act of potential hostility and reframed it as a proposal they were making to me. The sentry was visibly stunned by the pivot. He never expected a counter-inquiry like that. The atmosphere turned to ice for several heartbeats. Finally, a voice crackled through the walkie-talkie clipped to his chest, dripping with dark amusement. Intriguing. Let him in. The chain-link gates groaned as they were pulled open. I glanced back, giving Li Mo and the others a reassuring look, then began my solitary walk into the lion's den. Before long, I was escorted into the heart of the radio and TV tower. This place had been repurposed into a massive living complex. People were moving about in an eerie silence. Everyone was completely expressionless, like pre-programmed androids following a script. This level of rigid order sent a chill down my spine. Eventually, inside the rooftop broadcasting hall, I finally stood before their sovereign. He appeared to be in his late 40s, sporting a pair of sophisticated gold-rimmed glasses and a crisp, immaculate white dress shirt. He didn't look like a typical post-apocalyptic warlord. Honestly, he looked more like a tenured university professor. He was perched behind a sprawling broadcast desk, meticulously polishing his lenses. Welcome to my guest who navigates the world with logic. He lifted his gaze, eyes behind the glass as piercing and sharp as a hawk's. I presume you're the professor who loves playing 20 questions. I rudely yanked out the chair directly across from him and made myself comfortable. He offered a thin, faint smile, seemingly unbothered by my blatant lack of manners. In the end game, knowledge is power, is it not? He slid his glasses back onto the bridge of his nose, leaning forward just a fraction, with his fingers interlaced upon the mahogany surface. Your arrival is a most pleasant surprise. I was beginning to fear that in this entire city, I was the only soul truly wide awake, since you were already aware of my existence. Wasn't that idiotic broadcast a bit redundant? Just to test the waters with me. I countered his poise with a sharp verbal jab. No, that wasn't a mere test. He slowly shook his head, the smirk on his face widening. That was a proclamation. I was simply announcing my inevitable presence, while simultaneously filtering out the static of those too dim-witted to grasp the rules. Every word he spoke was saturated with an unshielded elitist arrogance and a chilling disregard for human life. My mind began racing at 100 miles an hour. This man was 10,000 times more dangerous than Zhang Hao. Zhang Hao's greed and malice were tattooed on his face, but the evil radiating from the man before me was gift-wrapped in high-level logic and raw intellect. He didn't just crave the spoils of plunder, he lived for the sheer high of intellectual dominance and the thrill of manipulating reality itself. He locked eyes with me, suddenly launching his first genuine inquiry. Since you've taken the initiative to seek me out, I assume you're a man of superior intellect. So, are you willing for the sake of every survivor's future to contribute your intellect and join our cause? This particular inquiry was 100 times more sinister than the centuries below. It was a trap cleverly disguised as a noble pursuit. If I failed to offer a proper rebuttal, I would be tacitly acknowledging his absolute leadership. My mind raced to deconstruct and analyze every single syllable hidden within his words. Contribute. Join us. These specific terms were dripping with the subtext of an unequal master-servant dynamic. He wasn't looking for a strategic ally. He wanted a high-functioning subordinate. I locked eyes with him and smirked. Professor, your question is certainly intriguing. However, before I provide my response, should I interpret your words as asking me, are you willing to collaborate with my team as equals? To collectively design a framework that safeguards the fundamental rights of all survivors, rather than demanding my unilateral submission to your individual, will I swap contribution for equal collaboration and replace joining you with collective design? The professor's practiced smile faltered for the very first time. He stared at me in total silence for 10 grueling seconds, the playful amusement in his eyes gradually evaporating, replaced by the wary caution of a man who'd met his match. You are far more perceptive than I anticipated. He suddenly pivoted his approach. Aren't you even curious how I managed to establish such a rigid absolute order so effortlessly without waiting for my reaction? He took the initiative to unveil the mystery, because the rules themselves are capable of evolving. When an individual successfully weaponizes the rules to subjugate the wills of over 100 people, they are granted a single opportunity to wish upon the rules. My heart plummeted into my stomach. The information advantage provided by my regression was completely obliterated in that single instant. This was a terrifying secret I had never heard of before. My very first wish was simply this: Iyaso. Anyone who even harbors the thought of saying no to me will endure the sensation of 1,000 needles piercing them. And just like that, order was established with effortless perfection. A fanatic manic light flickered within the professor's eyes. Suddenly, a paralyzing chill surged through my brain. It's no wonder everyone here acts like a mindless husk. It's not that they don't want to rebel. It's that they don't even dare to harbor the thought. Now he reclines back into his chair, resuming his posture of absolute dominance. Do you still believe you're in a position to demand equality? He assumed this revelation would be enough to crush me. But within his own words, I discovered his most fatal blind spot. I stared at his smug, self-satisfied face, reveling in his own supposedly genius design. And suddenly I found the whole thing pathetic. I spoke with a biting chill. Give it a rest. This cheap, narcissistic performance of yours is only impressive to you and the garbage bin. The professor's expression shifted instantly. I stood up, refusing to grant him another look, and instead scanned the entire hall, observing his subordinates who were beginning to stir uneasily because of my words. My gaze acted like a surgical scalpel, slicing through the facade of this fake tranquility. I raised my hand and pointed directly at the lofty professor, my movements slow, deliberate, and crystal clear, as if I were delivering a public verdict. My voice wasn't loud, yet it detonated like a thunderclap in everyone's hearts. Professor, said so. Don't you actually want to ask these followers of yours? Are you willing to slaughter innocent survivors just to feed my personal megalomaniacal ambitions, effectively becoming the same as the monsters, devoid of any shred of humanity? My question was a depth charge dropped into a stagnant pond, leaving the entire hall ringing with the blast. Every single pair of eyes was now locked onto the professor with lethal intensity. Their stares were no longer numb or hollow. They were a volatile cocktail of terror, hesitation, and a flicker of rage that had been suppressed for far too long. The atmosphere turned to stone, save for the low hum of murmurs rippling through the crowd. Becoming monsters, bolts, attacking innocent survivors. Those specific words pierced through to the final remnants of their humanity, their last line of moral defense. The professor's face drained from a bruised purple to a deathly white. He lurched upward from his seat, and that needle prick rule he took such pride in seemed to malfunction in this very moment. Because the question I posed didn't actually require a yes or no response. I was merely narrating a truth they all recognized, but were too terrified to acknowledge. I had voiced the silent, soul-searching interrogation hidden in their hearts. He lost from the second I spoke those words. He had already been defeated. Absolute nonsense. The professor finally snapped, his voice cracking under the sheer strain. He threw his hand up, his index finger trembling as he pointed at me. Stop spreading your venomous lies. Don't you want to ask everyone? Are you willing to trust a complete outsider? To dismantle the peace we've worked so tirelessly to build heat. This was his desperate final stand, trying to weaponize outsider and a peace, to pit the entire room against me once more. But it was too little too late. I didn't even acknowledge his question. Instead, I met the collective gaze of the crowd, and calmly, with rhythmic precision declared, I am the mountain, not the stream. I don't exist to be absorbed into someone's map, but to provide all the struggling streams, a path to converge into a vast, unstoppable sea. I paused for a heartbeat, scanning the wavering faces before me. Now, so? I have a question for you that requires no answer. Are you willing to join me in building an order truly dedicated to survival, rather than one fueling a single man's ego? An order that can stand against the forbidden beasts, allowing us to sleep soundly at night, without the crushing fear that tomorrow we must become cold-blooded executioners. As the last echoes of my voice faded, the crowd erupted into a frantic, irrepressible wave of commotion. The professor's loyalists, the very armed guards standing by his side, began exchanging uneasy glances, their grips on their weapons instinctively loosening. The scales of power have completely shifted. The professor watched his kingdom crumble as his allies deserted him, the color draining from his face, until he looked like a hollow shell devoid of all vitality. He collapsed back into his chair, utterly defeated. His downfall was absolute and humiliating. I didn't spare him a second glance, simply turning on my heel to head downstairs. Bring Lin Shui and Old Man Wang here immediately. Once Lin Shui and Old Man Wang arrived on the scene, they began mobilizing the crowd, systematically seizing control of the stockpile and the personnel. Everything proceeded with surgical precision, as if we were the rightful masters of this place all along. The annexation was smoother than I could have ever dreamed. I paced slowly toward the hall's massive floor-to-ceiling window, observing the square below where my followers and the professors, former subordinates, began their cautious initial contact and eventual integration. A new formidable sanctuary for survivors was taking shape right beneath my boots. Starting today, I am no longer a lone wolf struggling for a mere existence. I have ascended as a true sovereign. But before I could even let a smirk play on my lips, a chillingly familiar synthetic mechanical voice detonated without warning inside my skull. Beginner protection period terminated. Yanked. Rule update in progress. Oh.